At InDigital, we know the public safety professionals hold themselves to a high standard. In fact, standard doesn't do it justice. In over 25 years working alongside you, carrying millions of calls over our IP networks, your dedication has inspired us. That's why our ESI Net goes beyond industry standards, not only I3 compliant, but designed to adapt to future development for a network you can count on when it matters most. Learn more at indigital.net.
Have you ever met a 911 professional and asked, what's the worst call you've ever taken? Well, here's your answer. I heard your last breath the night you flipped your four-wheeler. I tried to call you the day you committed suicide by driving your car into a tree. Blue face, cold to the touch. I helped you with CPR after you found your infant face down, not breathing. It messed me up. I did everything I could, but it wasn't enough. You were with me from the beginning, Grandma. 27 years later, I took the 911 call when you died. How fitting to be there for me in the beginning, and I was there for you in the end. I miss you, Grandma. I am 911. This is but a glimpse into the world of emergency dispatch. But what is it really like to answer a call during someone's nightmare? What is the impact on the first responder answering the call? From Titletown Publishing, and available on Amazon or where you purchase your favorite books and ebooks. Imagine listening. Your worst day is our everyday. If Within the Trenches has ever taught you something, open your eyes to what it is like to be a 911 dispatcher, or has inspired you to become one, then help support us and join our Patreon. Get exclusive bonus content, one-of-a-kind swag, discounts on merchandise, ad-free early access to new episodes, and much more. To join, please visit patreon.com/WTT podcast. And if you're an industry partner, we have something for you as well. And now, for the show.
This is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned. Hey, what's going on? This is Ricardo with the Code 7 Podcast Network, and this is going to be episode 518 of Within the Trenches, True Stories from the 911 Dispatchers Who Live Them. This episode is sponsored by InDigital, a leader next-gen core services, and a big shout-out, as always, to patrons of the podcast, as well as Facebook subscribers. Thank you for everything. And I'm jumping in here really quick. This is going to be an Imagine Listening episode. This is the Imagine Listening session from the Oklahoma Public Safety Conference that I was at a few weeks ago. And thank you for having me there. It was the first time being part of that conference. An excellent one. It felt like family, just like the last few that I've been to. And those are the conferences that I love the most. So big shout out to Oklahoma. You all did it big. And it was a lot of fun. I had the chance to do a super session out there. And again, as I said, it was for Imagine Listening. And of course, that comes with open mic. So this session, or this episode rather, is going to be those first 30 minutes of the audio that was recorded from that session with the live audience, but also the stories that were recorded. That I ended up getting all of these right here, all of these written stories were the ones that were submitted. I recorded those, the voiceover and everything. So all of that is added in there as well. And just a big thanks to everyone for being there in support of each other and for sharing your stories. And so without further ado, here is episode 518 of Within the Trenches. Imagine watching your son take off on his four-wheeler. You've witnessed this many times. He rides, he has fun, and all is well. Now imagine you are 911, taking a call from frantic parents who have just found their son underneath his flipped four-wheeler. You listen to the parents scream as they remove it off his body. You tell them that help is on the way and give them CPR instructions. The officer arrives and you listen as he performs CPR. "Come on, buddy. Come on," is what you hear over the phone. This is what it's like within the trenches. In this episode, you will hear stories from the I Am 911 movement, a movement I started to fight for the reclassification of dispatchers from clerical to protective and bring awareness to the types of calls that 911 dispatchers answer on a daily basis. This is an Imagine Listening session, and we're here together at the 2023 Oklahoma Public Safety Conference. Now, you heard the warning at the beginning, but I must warn you again and add that if you suffer from PTSD or have suicidal tendencies, you are listening at your own risk. The stories you're about to hear are all true and come from the dispatchers who lived them. While some stories have a good outcome, the majority are horrifying. This is our reality. Your worst day is our everyday. So let's start with a bang. I want you to imagine each story, become the dispatcher who has taken each call, and imagine listening.
So that first story that I showed, that I submitted, but that I put out there for everyone, for the movement, I heard your last breath and I'd have flipped your four-wheeler. Hashtag I am 911. That week, a few days after that, I was watching a show on Netflix that I had been binge watching during that time in 2016. Spoiler alert. It was Stranger Things. It was season 1. I was really into it. And there's a scene in there where the sheriff finds this kid who had been missing throughout pretty much the whole season. When he finds him, he's unconscious. He's not breathing. And he starts CPR. And he ends up saying something like, "Come on, buddy, come on," as he's going through this. And as I'm watching this, I am crying. I'm losing it. And at the time, I didn't understand why. I thought, it's dramatic, right? But why am I crying like this? And then I realized it was a trigger because of that story that I shared a few days prior when I took that call. And I heard the officer on the radio, the deputy, say that he was there. Could hear him running. I could not put the phone down. I wanted to listen to make sure the kid was going to be okay. And what I heard on the phone was the deputy saying, "Come on, buddy, come on." It happens like that sometimes, doesn't it? Sometimes you don't realize, but it hits you. But again, I share it because it's therapeutic in a way to get it out there. Does anyone have a story they would like to share? Oh, immediately. Okay, I've got 2 here.
Been in the chair for 23 years. About 25, thank you. I started out as an accounting manager with Walmart, went through the Citizens Police Academy, and thought, 911 looks pretty cool. They had just had a bad accident on the interstate. About 3 months prior, we lost 2 firefighters. I was just so enthusiastic about hearing that type of stuff, and I'd never been anywhere near law enforcement. No one in my family was. And someone that also went through the academy called and said, "Hey, we've got an opening, apply." So I applied in April of 2000, didn't get hired until August of 2000. And it was hard, going from a Monday through Friday job to an overnight learning call taking. But I had my mentor as my call taking trainer. So fast forward 15 years, and I finally worked my way to day shift. I was excited. And I took a 911 call from a mother. It was a Monday morning. They were heading to school. She said, "I heard a gunshot." And I said, "Where did it come from?" She said, "My house. My son went in to get his homework." And so she runs inside, and we start the EMD thing because we're an EMD dispatch center. And I said, "Is he breathing?" And she said, "He is." And I said, "Okay, let's do CPR." And she said, "I can't. His brains are all over the wall." So we establish where the gun was. We go on. Police arrive within 2 minutes. The following week, because of where our agency sits right outside of Oklahoma City, we got a cell phone call from Spencer, where we do ambulance service. And I thought it was a mother on the phone because they were screaming at such a high pitch. It was a father. After I get him to bring his tone down, we established that his daughter had called him earlier in the day and said, "Daddy, I need to talk." And he said, "Not right now, I'm at work. But Daddy, I need to talk to you." "Not now, I'll talk to you tonight." And she said, "I love you, Daddy." And he came home to find her hanging. We established he'd cut her down. Because it was a cell phone call, we're EMD, we don't disconnect. Stayed on the phone until police got there, and it was about 12 minutes. But we established single parent, doesn't talk to mom, no siblings. That was his only child. His father lives in our city. And I got all that information to help out the county sheriff's department because they cover that agency. So I called him up and I said, "Hey, the nearest family member in case he needs someone is in our city." And they said, "I don't need that. We've got this." So I got angry because we need to be nicer to our agencies that we work with. So I was like, "Oh, whatever." I didn't think anything was wrong. I thought it was fine. So the next week, our chief of police is very infamous. He would come over and hang out with our emergency manager. And I got called into the office, and I'm like, "What the heck? Why?" And I go in, and he looks at me, and he says, "Hey, you took that call the other day about that kid that shot himself in the head. How'd that go?" And it flipped my switch. And I screamed at the chief of police, "How do you effing think it went? How do you think it went? Her son just shot himself in the head. How do you think it went?" And I went in and had a seat. I didn't think I had a problem. I didn't think it had affected me. 6 hours later, my boss sends me an email. "You might want to talk to someone. Here's a phone number for someone in Oklahoma City." I was angry. They knew I had an issue, but they don't want to talk to me personally. They want to push me off on someone else. So I didn't talk about it. I didn't respond to my boss for 3 weeks. "Hey, thanks." That's all I typed. "Hey, thanks." It wasn't until after I responded, so I was kind of trying to turn the page and think about things, that I sat at home for about 4 hours crying. Called my sister in Utah. I said, "I'm struggling." She said, "I already know that. Mom's already told me." I said, "Really?" She goes, "Yeah. You haven't been calling Mom? You haven't been doing anything with your friends? You need to talk to someone." So I found a former deputy that was a friend of mine that has a master's of psychology, and he's now practicing in Yukon. And I called him up and I said, "I need you." And we talked over the phone for hours to get help. So now I make it part of my training for my trainees, because I'm a CTO, is to discuss it with our new hires. You're going to have hard calls, but you got to talk about it. And as your mentor today, I'm always there. Here's my phone number. Don't be afraid to reach out. And as administrators and people that have those others underneath us, we need to make them feel comfortable about talking about it. Yes, we're used to just pushing it under the rug and not worrying about it, but we have got to talk about it more and not feel like nobody can listen. Find a friend, call me. I'm on Facebook, TikTok, whatever. I'll listen. I'll be there for you.
Thank you.
I was on the phone with you after you hit a cow on the country road after a curve. I heard the screams as another car came around the corner and hit and killed you. I can still hear the screams. I am 911. Your ex-wife found you in your apartment. When asked if you were beyond all help, she described your head as black and swollen. I had sent you an ambulance just 2 weeks prior for alcohol poisoning. You were very thankful, sweet, and embarrassed. I'm sorry there wasn't more help for you when you needed it, and that you likely didn't feel you deserved it when you absolutely did. I am 911. February 14th. I thought would be a good day, being that it's supposed to be a day about love. I was wrong, and Valentine's Day was forever changed for me. The phone rings, just like it had a million times before. This time was different. I answer the phone, and I don't hear a hello. I hear a woman's voice screaming at the top of her lungs, begging for someone to stop. She kept pleading with this male to stop whatever it was he was doing. I tried over and over again to get the woman's name and find out what's going on. Nothing. I heard nothing but the woman begging for her life. You could hear the desperation in her voice. I'm trying to listen to the background noises to see if I could figure out what was happening, but there was nothing I could hear besides the woman saying, "No, stop. Please stop." By 3 minutes into the call, we realized who it was and where she lived. I immediately had units en route, and thankfully, she only lived a couple miles from our police station. I'm still on the phone with the caller, and she's still frantically pleading for her life. Then, on the 3rd minute from the time I picked up her call, the phone went silent. Not a single sound was heard. And it was an eerie silence. A silence so loud that I could never, ever forget. Within 3 minutes of the initial call, my officers arrived on scene. Immediately, they start CPR. Come to find out, her 17-year-old grandson stabbed her to death. I am 911. On a normal midnight shift, one of my coworkers took a 911 call with an open line of just a woman screaming. No words, no background noise that could be heard, just screaming. We start police towards the coordinates, which plotted at an apartment complex. Then, I get a 911 call from the maintenance man for that apartment complex. The female screaming was a mother who found her baby girl not breathing. I encouraged him to have the mother start CPR, but she was too frantic to do anything. I had to instruct him to take the baby from her, literally rip her baby out of her arms, and move far enough away for us to be able to hear each other. We did CPR together until officers got on scene, and one of the officers said my name and said, "I'm here. I got it. I'm taking over." The caller had me on speakerphone to perform CPR while still being able to hear me. I'm not sure I have ever been so relieved to hear my own name, but the baby didn't make it. I still hear the mom wailing sometimes. I am 911. I was working when we received a call from a crazy man at someone's cabin in the middle of the mountains that was squatting in it. Several teenagers had come into contact with him, and they were able to run off after giving him their four-wheeler. A few days later, I was with my parents while my mom was having surgery, and my dad received a call from his best friend's wife saying she hadn't heard from him. My dad and his best friend had property a few miles from the incident. His wife said that there had been a horrible accident and that my dad's best friend was dead. I immediately got into the car and drove 3 hours with my dad driving to the scene to lead deputies to the property. The SWAT team was called out, and we had a manhunt for a week. I volunteered to go out with tactical dispatch to be in the field while we searched for him. We received a call from the store clerk about 10 miles away who saw the suspect in his store. Our deputies arrived just as he was walking away. A gunfight ensued, and he ultimately shot and killed himself. This was in 2015, and it still haunts me. The suspect was hiding in the house and came up behind my dad's best friend and shot him in the back of the head before he ever knew what happened. I am 911. I took the call when you found your baby, face down, in the pool, not breathing. I am 911. I took the call when you found your young daughter deceased after having some sort of seizure during the night. I am 911. I sat next to my partner and heard the entire conversation of you saying there was a problem at your house, and when asked what it was, you said, me, and then shot yourself, only to hear your wife walk in and say, look what your father's done to himself. I will never forget the poor kids who were screaming and witnessed it. I am 911. I took a call of teenagers that their car flipped and hit a tree. Responders got on scene, and one of the teenagers was pinned in the car. The teenager pinned was a child of a former coworker. I was trying to get that coworker notified, but wasn't able to before that coworker called. This child had not made it. They passed on the way to the hospital. I had to tell that coworker what they needed to hear instead of telling them the truth. This still haunts me to this day. I'm not sure I will ever get over that because as a father myself, I would have wanted to know the truth. I am 911. I took a call from a Hispanic female that only spoke Spanish. Me, being Peruvian, but not raised speaking Spanish, I can understand basic Spanish. I did my best, using what I know and also Googling Spanish phrases to get her address and what happened. Officers get on scene and determine her husband tried to use a table leg to strangle her. She was able to get away and run down the street where she called me. My officer told me later that her and the 10 plus people living in that small house were all illegal immigrants and ICE was being called. I still feel guilty and also glad I took that call. The guilt usually outweighs though. I am 911. About 4 months after finding our 36-year-old son dead, I took a call. A screaming mother just found her 36-year-old son unresponsive. I didn't fall apart till I left work. The next day, I found out he survived. I was happy that mom had her son back. I am 911. I took a call from a 16-year-old girl that was traveling with her mother and siblings back home from their vacation. The call was her screaming. For a while, I told her that I had her location, but I needed her to tell me if she was moving or not. She was able to get out that they had stopped. She had finally calmed down enough to tell me what was going on. She said that they had wrecked, and the vehicle was on its side, and her mother was hanging in the driver's seat, not breathing. She wanted to do CPR, so I listened to her struggle and cry as she tried to get her out. Eventually, she said, "I can't save my mom." And I stayed talking to her until deputies got there. I learned after the call that her father died in a car crash not long before that. I think about her all the time. I can't imagine being 16 in a random state, having lost both parents. I'll never know if she made it back home or how she's doing. Her screams still haunt me, and it's been 2 years. I am 911. I answered your call. As I picked up, you yelled, "She killed him. Why?" I tried asking questions and getting information. You'd been outside mowing your lawn. After you hollered for your wife inside, you couldn't find her. But your app showed she was home. You found her in your son's room. She shot him in the head and then shot herself. You were sobbing and yelling, asking why she took him with her. I didn't have that answer. I struggled to comfort you and had you go outside to the driveway to wait. You paced and talked to me as you calmed down. I had you take deep breaths. The sentence that sticks with me the most was, I was mad and was wondering what's for dinner. You felt guilty for normal, mundane thoughts. My heart hurt for you. I still hear your loud screams of why. I am 911. I listened to you let him in the bathroom with you. He tricked you. I listened as he stabbed you to death. It only took 1.5 minutes. Once you were dead, he took the phone from you and said hello to me. You were the reason we found him and got to save your sisters. I am 911. I stayed with you on the phone until emergency services got there, hearing you take your last breath when you wrecked your motorcycle. I also held your wife and son as they cried that night at my house. I am 911. I stayed on the phone with your dad while he read your suicide note and sobbing. You were only 13 years old. He heard your gunshot while making you breakfast. I'll never forget your family. I still have the rose your mom sent me. I am 911. I took your 911 call. I heard your frantic screams. I knew your voice, but you were so upset. All I could understand was, this is your mother. He has a gun. I then heard my 2 daughters crying in the background. I knew where you were because I was able to decipher you were in front of our friend's house in our neighborhood. The first officer I dispatched was my husband, the father of our daughters, your son-in-law. Once I knew he was with all of you and you were safe, I left my dispatch center and rushed to be with you all too. I made it in 14 minutes. I am 911. It was about 3 a.m. when I took your father's call. Your family had been sick and you were sleeping on the couch. Your father had been there over you, patting your little back. He was exhausted from his own illness. He fell asleep on you, suffocating you. He woke up to find you were not breathing. I gave you CPR through him. The paramedics arrived and took you to the hospital, emergent. You were only 14 months old. And today, you are 22 years old. You lived. I am 911.
I've been in law enforcement for 20 years. First of it, I was in the jail, so I knew a lot of the people in the small community I work in, and then after that, I've been in dispatch for another 10. In the grand scheme of things, this wasn't the worst call I've ever done, but this is the one that's going to stick with me forever. We had a special agent that decided he didn't need to tell us that he was out and about. He was too good for that. But he did choose to sign into his mapping service, so we at least knew his location. I hadn't noticed he was out and about yet. He comes on the radio and starts screaming, "I've been in an accident. I've been in an accident." He won't give us anything else. We don't know how many vehicles are involved. We don't know where he's at, except for I had that mapping service, and I was praying that that mapping service was correct. I start sending everybody because I don't know what's going on. Troopers, it was out in the county, so we had to send troopers too. I got troopers en route. I've got ambulances en route. I'm calling air dispatch because I don't know what I have going on. Air dispatch can't fly because the weather's horrible. But we have to keep calling every air dispatch that we have just to make sure that none of them can fly. I keep having to step out of the room because our room gets really loud when there's a lot going on. Our deputies arrive on scene and they said it's a 2-vehicle accident. Deputy's out of the vehicle, he's laying on the ground. The other car has rolled. There's two people inside. They end up with 3 patients. One of them codes on the way to the hospital. This wife keeps screaming about her baby in her tummy, and she's worried about her pregnancy. And so they get her to the hospital, she's fine. They take my deputy my agent, and they think he's got all sorts of internal injuries. They've got ribs and internal bleeding and wrists. He walked away fine. All the scans came back fine. Should be the end of the story. Everybody cleared. The officers cleared the scene. They walked it, made sure everything was picked up. Wreckers took the cars. The guy had a canine. They took him. Took the dog to the vet. Everything was fine. Comes along a torrential downpour. It just pours for about an hour. OHP calls me and they said, "Hey, I need you to get everybody you can back out there to that wreck site." And I said, "Okay, what's going on?" And she goes, "Well, the priest was talking to the family and he mentioned that there were some family members in Guatemala. So he spoke Spanish, so he called them. Got a hold of them through friends of friends of friends and finally got a hold of them." And the mother goes, "But what about my baby? There was no car seats, there was nothing." And she said, "But no, my baby was with them." And through a whole bunch of talking, we figured out that they had an 8-year-old with them. And everybody went out there, fire department, EMS. And where they had rolled, there was a field. They don't know how it was possible for what happened, but she was ejected from that vehicle. There was no signs of ejection. How she was ejected, she would have had to have flown over my agent's vehicle. He never saw her. The grass was taller than I was. And within 10 minutes of being out there, they found her face down in the mud. She had been there for 3 hours, dead in that field, with it pouring on her. And that mom at the scene couldn't even bother to tell us that there was somebody else with her. And that poor little girl, she was dead. She was dead on impact. There was nothing that could have been done. And I know as a dispatcher, there was nothing else I could have done. But I feel responsible that I should have somehow known that she was out there in that field. And this poor girl couldn't even be found when they were there. She had to go through a torrential downpour and sit there in the mud like she was nobody because the people in that car didn't care enough for her. And it took a priest to find her. And that will always stick with me. And in the grand scheme, it wasn't my worst call, but that poor little girl will always be with me.
Thank you for sharing.
March 28th, 2006. I'll never forget that date. We had officers out looking for a missing 10-year-old. I'm kind of like you, kid calls, no fun. We'd had them out for a couple hours looking for this little 10-year-old. She goes home from school every day. She goes for a walk. You know, nothing unusual. Kids do that. You know, people do that. So parents come home. She's not there. They call in. We've, send out the cavalry, so to speak. We've got them out looking for, they'd probably been out for a couple hours, I'm not really sure. And at that time, I wasn't assigned to the actual radio, but I was what we call radio relief, and I was giving that person their lunch break. And so I took over the tactical that they were on and was listening to them tell us what they were doing. And while I was sitting there, this call comes in, and it was in the area that they were looking for. And I read it and realized what it was, so I keyed up on the channel, and I tried to get a hold of the primary officer, and one of them finally answered me. And I told him that this guy had called in saying that he had found a body in a parking lot, and it was a shopping center here in town that he was walking behind it, I guess, and officers had flooded that area. And he calls in and says that he found a body by a dumpster in the shopping center. And so I read all of the call to him, and at the very end of the call, the very end of the incident, he says, "There's a man in the parking lot screaming, 'That's my daughter.'" And I said that to him. I gave him the time. I took my foot off the foot pedal and went, son of a, because I knew what I had just put out. And so I keyed back up, and I got a hold of that officer, and I was like, I don't even remember what I said to him, honestly, but he's like, "Yeah, we're on the way." And within 5 minutes, they had verified that it was that 10-year-old that they were looking for. And sat there for a minute, and I was like, oh, good Lord. And we had people coming in for overtime. People were coming in for shifts. And everybody come over to me, and they were like, "Do you need me to take it? Do you need me?" I was like, "No, I need you to leave me alone." I was like, "I'm good. Just walk away, And so I got up, got to my break time, got everybody relieved, and I went outside, and I was just bawling. And went on the rest of the night. After work, this was when our center was actually with the police department. I went to the detective division after work because a lot of the officers had gone up there. And I just went to check on them, and they ended up checking on me. And I was actually still up there when the crime scene detectives came back with the pictures. And they were like, "You sure you want to see this?" And I'm like, "I just want to see, just out of morbid curiosity. I didn't want to see anything other than just like the buildings." And then they started flipping through the picture so fast, and they got to her, and I lost it. And so I finally ended up going home, crying myself to sleep. Get up the next morning, I'm going in for overtime. And I'll never forget this. I walked in the room, I was walking halfway across, and one of the ladies from Graveyard had stayed over, and she walks up and meets me as far as her headset would take her. And she walks over and meets me and says, "They found him. They found the guy that had taken her and killed her." And I lost it all over again. And that's a call. It's the first time I've cried about it in about 5 years, but it's a call that's always going to stick with me, and I'm never going to forget her. And I'll never forget that date.
Thank you. It might not feel like it, but this is a good thing. For a long time, it was almost as if we were not allowed to feel. We just continue with what we're doing, and we move on. But again, it's a new day, and we're letting this out. We're sharing, we're feeling. It's hard to explain what it's like to be in this session with people who know exactly what it is that you go through, what it's like when you're taking this phone call. I always tell people I'm calm, cool, and collected when I take these phone calls, but in the back of my mind, I'm freaking out with the caller as well, because we're empaths, right? We put ourselves in their shoes so that we can understand, relate, ask the questions, get those answers, and get them help as fast as possible. But what do we do afterwards? We're the best at communications, right? But sometimes communicating with each other, not the best. But that's why sessions like this are so important. And the job that you do, your career, your profession is so important. If you feel that you need to talk to somebody, please do. Don't be like me, where I was burying it for years. Because it's going to impact you. Listen to your body. Because if you don't listen, it's going to make you listen. And at that point, I'll just say it's a lot harder. But we can do this together. And also, even if you didn't share a story today, it's okay. Because you're here in support of each other. That's what this is all about. So please, a round of applause for everyone who shared a story.
I want to thank everyone once again for being there and for participating in the session. I know it's not the easiest thing, and a lot of people, afterwards were saying, you should have had tissues, or you should have told us that we needed tissues. And, a lot of people have said the same thing before. However, I always come back with, if I would have told you that in the beginning, if you would have known that you needed tissue for this session, would you have attended? And a lot of times people say, probably not. So what has happened at other sessions is we get in there, and as I start talking, as I start giving the intro of what we're going to be doing, those that are in there already who know what we're getting into, they start handing out tissue. Or when I was at the Ohio mini conference, what they did was, as we started, someone was walking around and putting boxes of tissues on each table, and then people knew that what we were about to get into was going to be emotionally intense. But again, you were all there in support of each other. Even if you didn't share a story, it's okay. When you're ready, please do so. But just being there in support of those who were sharing, that is everything. So thank you so very much. I know I say this all the time, but I'll say it again. It's hard to explain what it's like to be in a room full of people who know exactly what you're going through and sharing those stories, but also knowing that you are in a safe place to do so, because all of the stories go out anonymously. So again, thank you all very much. Thank you for what you do every single day. And a big thanks to the conference for the opportunity to go out there and present the Imagine Listening session. So for those who are watching and listening, if you have any comments, questions, or you want to be a guest on the show, you can email us, and that is going to be wttpodcast@gmail.com. Once again, that is wttpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us all over social media. You can also become a patron of the podcast at patreon.com/wttpodcast, or you can head over to facebook.com/withinthetrenchespodcast/support and find, everything there for supporting us. To make it a lot easier, in the bottom left-hand corner, but for those who are simply listening to this on your favorite podcasting platform, it is links.co/WTT podcast. And once again, that is links with 2 eyes.co/WTT podcast. And everything is on there. All of my social media, the latest episode, how to become a supporter, whether it be on Patreon or Facebook. Imagine Listening, the book, being out there, and where you can order it, whether it be Amazon, Books A Million, Barnes & Noble, or anywhere you buy your books and ebooks, you can get Imagine Listening. And Imagine Listening Volume 2 is available for pre-order already as well. So make sure to get out there and get yours before everybody else. And it's going to be awesome. It's going to be really, really good, and I'm excited for that as well. This can be seen on Facebook, YouTube, as well as Twitter and LinkedIn. And then you can listen to this show 24/7 on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, and withinthetrenches.net. Have a good one, everyone. And we'll see you in the next one.